Good morning, everyone. Today we are covering section 2.1 for integrated 2 KC2. Okay, properties of parallelograms. So a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. Remember, a quadrilateral is a four-sided figure with opposite sides are parallel. And if you're not sure what the symbol for parallel is, it's two lines, like two L's, to each other. Okay, so a quadrilateral where opposite sides are parallel to each other. Now, a parallelogram has a number of different properties that are true. Okay, so besides them being parallel, that's actually the first one, so we can write that again, right? Opposite sides are parallel. That's from the definition. Now, we also have that opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so if you have one side is equal to 10 centimeters and the other side has to be equal to 10 centimeters as well. Next property, you have opposite angles. So opposite angles are congruent. Okay, the ones that would create kind of like an X. Okay, so those are opposite angles. Next one is consecutive angles. Now remember, consecutive means next to. Okay, so angles that are next to each other are supplementary. If you can't remember what supplementary is, it means that they add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so you have angles that add up to 180 degrees. And the last one are about the diagonals. Diagonals bisect each other. If you can't remember what bisect means, remember that means that you cut it in half. So cuts in half. So the diagonals cut each other in half. Okay, so I am going to show you a picture that goes with this. Okay, now if you see, I color-coded 1 through 5 for this reason, so that I can color-code my picture because you guys are going to create a foldable. Okay, so number 1, opposite sides are parallel. So the symbol for parallel is an arrow. So these two sides are parallel to each other, and the left and the right are parallel to each other. That's the first property. Second property, orange, is opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so the left is congruent to the right, and the top is congruent to the bottom. Again, so if I tell you that the top is 10 centimeters, the bottom has to be 10 centimeters. If I tell you that the left side is 5 centimeters, and the right side has to be equal to 5 centimeters as well. Number 3, opposite angles are congruent. Now the angles opposite are right here. So on the bottom left would be opposite to the top right. So those two angles are congruent. And then the top left is congruent to the bottom right. And those two angles are congruent. Those are opposite angles, okay? And they are congruent. Now the last two. So the next one is number 4, consecutive angles, are angles that are next to each other, are supplementary. Okay, so what that means is that like these two angles are next to each other. So they have to add up to 180 degrees. So if I tell you that, you know, for example, the angle on the left is 80 degrees, then the angle on the right has to be 100 degrees, because if I subtract 180, if I subtract 80 from 180, I get 100. Okay, so together they have to make up 180 degrees. Now you have 4 pairs of these. Okay, so the top 2 are one of them, and you have the ones on the right. They also have to equal to 180 degrees. Then you have the ones on the bottom. Those are 180 degrees. And then the ones on the left, that has to add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so you have 4 different pairs of supplementary angles here, because those are angles that are next to each other. And then the very last one are the diagonals. So if I draw my diagonals here, okay, there's one. Here's another one. These diagonals bisect each other, which means that this is now congruent to this because it was cut in half by the other diagonal line. And this is congruent to this part because the other diagonal cut that in half as well. Okay, so those are the 5 properties of parallelograms. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Okay, we're going to use properties of parallelograms to solve for x. So here I have number 1. I need to find out what x is equal to, but remember these two are next to each other. They have to add up to 180 degrees. So x is equal to 180 minus 67 degrees, which is just 13 degrees. That is my final answer. Number 2, they're kind of they're across from each other. They're opposite. Okay, they would form an x if I connected them, right? They're part of the diagonals, angles. Okay, so because they are opposite, x is just the same thing. I really have to do nothing. I'm just identifying there. Okay, now number 3, again, angles that are next to each other have to add up to 180 degrees. But here, I don't have a single number. I have expressions. Okay, but I can still go ahead and solve for x here, right? Because I know that 3x plus 5 plus 5x plus 15 are supplementary, which means that they equal to 180 degrees. So I would combine like terms. 3x plus 5x will give me 8x. 5 plus 15 will give me 20, equal to 180 degrees. Now I would just solve for x. Cancels out here. 8x is equal to 160. Divide both sides by 8. So x is equal to 20. And that's it. And then the very last one, again, angles here are opposite to one another, so they are congruent. So I have 2x is equal to 4x plus 16. It is not supplementary here. Okay, so I could subtract 4x to both sides. Cancels out. I get negative 2x is equal to 16. Divide both sides by negative 2. X is equal to negative 8, and I'm done. Okay. Now that was the first day. So this is day 1. Rhombuses will be day 2.